From the heart of Africa to your screen. This is Tales Africa, where every story cuts deep. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications because it will mean the whole world to me. Now, let's get right into the story. The conference room fell silent except for the nervous shuffling of papers and the steady tick of an expensive wall clock. 23 university graduates sat around the polished mahogany table, their crisp suits and confident faces barely masking the desperation in their eyes. The job market had been brutal, and this interview at Ecovante Corporation represented their last hope for meaningful employment. At the head of the table sat a figure they couldn't quite see clearly, backlit by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor office. His voice was calm, measured, almost familiar as he spoke. "Before we begin these interviews," the CEO said, his hands folded on the table, "I want to tell you all a story. 3 months ago, some students at the University of Lagos thought it was amusing to record themselves mocking a garbage collector. They laughed at his clothes, his work, his dignity. They posted it online for the world to see." The graduates shifted uncomfortably. Something about this felt personal, targeted. "Today," the voice continued, "those same students are sitting in this room, begging for jobs at that garbage collector's company." The figure leaned forward, and the light finally revealed his face. Recognition dawned like a nightmare across the room. Gasps filled the air. Some of the candidates turned pale. Others began to stand as if to flee. It was him, the man they had humiliated, the man they had called worthless. But this story started 3 months earlier. Chinedu Okafor's alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m., just as it had every morning for the past 15 years. But unlike most people who might groan at such an ungodly hour, Chinedu rose with purpose. At 42, his body still carried the strength of his youth, though his hands bore the calluses of honest work and his face carried lines that spoke of both struggle and wisdom. His small apartment in Mushin was modest but immaculately clean. Every surface gleamed, every corner organized with military precision. This was a man who understood that dignity wasn't about what you owned, but how you carried yourself. As he prepared for the day, Chinedu's movements were methodical, practiced. He dressed in his bright orange uniform, the colors of Lagos State Waste Management, and laced-up boots that had seen 1,000 miles of city streets. In the mirror, he saw not a garbage collector but a man who kept his city clean, who provided an essential service, who had built something extraordinary from nothing. The truth was, Chinedu Okafor owned the largest waste management and recycling empire in West Africa. Ecovante Corporation, with its fleet of 500 trucks, 12 processing plants, and over 3,000 employees, was his creation. But every Tuesday and Thursday, he still walked the routes himself, still lifted bins, still swept streets, not because he had to, but because he never wanted to forget where he came from. His philosophy was simple. You could never truly lead people if you wouldn't do the work yourself. 20 minutes away, in the luxury halls of the University of Lagos, a different world was awakening. The final year students of the business administration program lived in a bubble of privilege and assumption. Most came from the Lagos elite families, children of politicians, oil executives, and inherited wealth. They had never known hunger, never doubted their place in the world's hierarchy. Charles Adebowale was their unofficial leader. a 23-year-old whose father owned three oil wells and whose mother sat on the board of two major banks. He drove a brand new Mercedes-Benz C-Class to campus, wore designer suits to lectures, and treated the university staff like servants. His followers: Tinuke Arowolo, daughter of a former governor; Tade Bakare, whose family controlled half the shipping in Lagos Harbour, and 15 others, formed an exclusive circle of entitlement. They called themselves the Future, convinced that the world would bend to their wills simply because it always had. That Tuesday morning, as Chinedu began his route through Victoria Island, these students were just waking up in their air-conditioned dormitories, preparing for another day of theoretical learning about business leadership, a subject they believed they already mastered by birthright. The collision between these two worlds was inevitable. Chinedu had been walking the Victoria Island route since dawn. The gleaming towers of corporate Lagos rose around him like monuments of ambition, and he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his own headquarters occupied one of the tallest among them. But today, dressed in his orange uniform, pushing his waistcoat down Amadu Bello Way, he was simply doing the work that needed doing. The University of Lagos business students had chosen the upscale area for their real-world research project, an assignment that required them to interview professionals about leadership and success. They emerged from their air-conditioned bus like tourists in their own city, designer notebooks in hand, smartphones ready to capture content for their social media accounts. Charles spotted Chinedu first. The older man was bent over an overflowing bin, methodically sorting through the contents, separating recyclables from waste with practiced efficiency. His uniform was clean but showed the honest stains of hard work. His focus was complete, professional. "Look at this guy," Charles said, loud enough for his friends and several passers-by to hear. "This is what failure looks like, people. 40-something years old and still picking up other people's trash." Tinuka giggled, pulling out her phone. "Oh my God, Charles, we should interview him. Ask him about his leadership philosophy." The sarcasm dripped from her voice like poison. Tade joined in, his voice carrying the privileged sneer of someone who had never known consequences. "Yeah, let's ask him how he wants to expand his garbage empire. Maybe he's got some innovative strategies for collecting more rubbish." The group approached Chinedu, who looked up from his work with patient eyes. He had heard their words, seen their sneers, but there was no anger in his expression. Only a quiet assessment, the look of a man who had learned to read people quickly and accurately. "Excuse me, sir," Charles said, his tone dripping with false politeness. "We are business students from the university. We are doing a project on professional success and leadership. Would you mind sharing your career aspirations with us?" The other students giggled behind their hands, phones recording. Chinedu straightened slowly, his full height impressive despite his humble surroundings. When he spoke, his voice was calm, educated, carrying none of the subservience they expected. "Career aspirations," he repeated thoughtfully. "I suppose my aspiration is to continue doing work that matters, to build something sustainable, to leave the world cleaner than I found it." The sophistication of his response caught them off guard for a moment, but Charles quickly recovered. "That is inspiring," he said, the word loaded with mockery. "And how do you plan to achieve these ambitious goals? Through garbage collection?" Every empire starts with understanding the foundation. Chinedu replied quietly. You would be surprised what you can learn from what people throw away, about their values, their waste, their true priorities. Tinuke stepped forward, emboldened by the growing crowd of onlookers. Oh, so you are a philosopher garbage man. That's rich. Tell us, wise one, what great insights have you gained from sorting through our trash? The crowd was growing now. Other students, office workers, street vendors. Some looked uncomfortable, but many pulled out phones, sensing viral content in the making. Chinedu looked around at the faces surrounding him, seeing the mixture of cruelty and curiosity, the hunger for entertainment at another's expense. He had faced this kind of mockery before, early in his journey, but now, with everything he had built, everything he had achieved, he felt only sadness for these young people who mistook cruelty for superiority. I've learned, he said slowly, his voice carrying clearly over the murmur of the crowd, that the most successful people are often those who understand that no honest work is beneath them, and that the greatest failures are usually those who believe their best circumstances make them automatically superior to others. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Chelsea's face flushed red. Are you trying to lecture us? You are a garbage collector. We are university undergraduates, future leaders of this country. You are nothing. Nothing. Chinedu asked quietly. Is that what you think? Look at you. Tade joined in, gesturing at Chinedu's uniform, his cat, his honest work. Look at your life. This is what happens when you don't get an education, when you don't come from the right family. You end up picking up trash while your betters walk past. The crowd murmured. Some nodded in agreement with the students. Others looked uncomfortable with the cruelty on display. Chinedu's response was measured, dignified. You know, in my experience, education is about more than degrees, and family worth is measured by what you contribute, not what you inherit. But the students were beyond reason now, intoxicated by their audience and their perceived power. Contribute? Tinuke laughed harshly. What could you possibly contribute? You are a street sweeper, a nobody. The only thing you will ever be is exactly what you are right now: invisible, irrelevant, and poor. The phones kept recording. The crowd kept growing, and somewhere in the back of the circle, a few people began to feel uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Chinedu looked around one more time, his gaze taking in each face, each expression, each person recording his humiliation. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, not a bitter smile, not a broken smile, but the calm, confident smile of a man who knew something others didn't. You know what? He asked softly. I hope you all remember this moment. I hope you remember it very clearly. With that, he returned to his work, ignoring the continued laughter, the jeers, the phones capturing what they thought was his defeat. But Chinedu Okafor hadn't been defeated. He had been taking notes. By evening, the video had exploded across Nigerian social media. The hashtag Trashman Philosopher began to trend on Twitter. Instagram stories shared the clips with laughing emojis. TikTok remixes set the confrontation to trending songs. The students had edited the footage clearly, cutting out Chinedu's more articulate responses and focusing on their witty comebacks. They presented themselves as young, successful Nigerians putting an arrogant street cleaner in his place. The narrative they crafted was simple. Entitled garbage collector gets reality checks from future leaders. In their group chat, the students celebrated their viral fame. From Charles, bro, we had 50k views already. This is insane. From Tinuke, CNN Africa just shared our video. We are famous. From Tade, my father saw it on his WhatsApp. Even he is laughing. The comment section was brutal. These kids are savage. 3 laughing emojis. Finally, someone told these street cleaners the truth. Why was the old man even arguing? Know your place. Future leaders right there. Crown emoji. But not everyone was laughing. Buried among the crowd comments were others. This is just bullying. That man was working honestly. These kids have no respect. Their parents failed them. Something about this doesn't feel right. Dr. Aduni Ogundimu, a professor of sociology at the University of Lagos, shared the video with a different perspective. This video reveals more about class privilege and cruelty than it does about any reality check. These students have learned to mistake inherited advantages for personal superiority. They will learn eventually that the world is more complex than they imagine. But her voice was drowned out by the tide of viral entertainment. In his modest apartment at night, Chinedu watched the video on his phone. He saw the comments, the shares, the remixes. His assistant, Mrs. Folake, had called 3 times, furious and ready to show these children who they are dealing with. Sir, just say the word, she had pleaded. One press release and this whole thing changes. Let me call the media. Let me tell them who you really are. But Chinedu had declined. Not yet, Folake. Let them have their moment. Let them feel powerful. Sometimes people need to climb very high before they understand how far they can fall. He had learned patience in the hardest school, poverty, rejection, and the slow climb from nothing to everything. These students would learn too, but their education was just beginning. As he prepared for bed, Chinedu made 2 phone calls. The first was to his head of human resources. I want you to track something for me, he said quietly. Find out what happens to those students when they graduate, where they apply for work, what companies they target. I have a feeling they'll be reaching out to us soon. The second call was to his old friend, Professor Adebisi Olatunji, Dean of Career Services at the University of Lagos. Bisi, he said, I need to ask you a favor. When those business students graduate next month, I want you to make sure they know about the opportunities at Ecovante Corporation. Tell them we are the largest environmental services company in West Africa. Tell them we are hiring. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Chinedu, what are you planning? Justice, Chinedu replied simply, but the kind that teaches rather than destroys. Their viral success went to their heads like strong wine. Charles, Tinuke, Tade, and their circle began to see themselves as social media influencers, young voices of Nigerian excellence, putting pretentious commoners in their place. They started a YouTube channel called Reality Check Nigeria, where they could find people they deemed delusional and publicly humble them. Their content formula was simple: find someone poor or working class who showed any sign of ambition or dignity, then mock them back to reality. They filmed episodes with taxi drivers who spoke about their business plans, with market women who discussed their children's education, with security guards who mentioned their evening classes. Each video garnered hundreds of thousands of views. Sponsors began reaching out. Charles was invited to speak at a youth conference about authentic Nigerian leadership. Tinuke was featured in a magazine article about Gen Z changemakers. The success fed their worst instincts. At university, they became insufferable. They treated professors with barely concealed condescension, submitted assignments that were clearly ghostwritten by hired help, and used their newfound fame to intimidate anyone who challenged them. Dr. Chioma Obinna, their business ethics professor, tried to address their behavior during a lecture on corporate responsibility. True leadership, she said, looking directly at Charles, is not about putting others down to elevate yourself. It's about lifting others up alongside you. Charles raised his hand with a smirk. With respect, Dr. Obioma, that sounds like the kind of thing people say when they've never actually had to make hard business decisions. In the real world, there are winners and losers. We are just honest about which side we are on. The class laughed, some genuinely amused, others uncomfortable but afraid to speak against the popular students. And what makes you so certain you're a winner, Miss Adebowale? Dr. Obioma asked quietly. Look around. Charles gestured broadly. Success recognizes success. We are the ones with the viral content, the speaking engagements, the brand partnerships. We are the ones people want to hear from. Meanwhile, that garbage collector is probably still somewhere picking up trash, forgotten by everyone except us, and only because we made him famous for being pathetic. The professor's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested she was filing this conversation away for future reference. After class, Charles approached the lectern. Dr. Obioma, I hope you don't take this personally, but the old ways of thinking about business, all this lift each other up stuff, it is not realistic anymore. The market rewards clarity, not kindness. We are just ahead of the curve. Dr. Obioma looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Adebowale, in my 20 years of teaching, I have seen many students who confused temporary visibility with permanent value. I have also seen how quickly fortunes can change. I hope for your sake that you learn the difference before life teaches it to you the hard way. But Charles was beyond advice. He was drunk on his own success, convinced that his moment of viral fame had revealed his true destiny as a leader and tastemaker. Graduation came with all the pomp and circumstance the University of Lagos could muster. The ceremony was held at the Tafawa Balewa Square, with families beaming proudly as their children received degrees that represented years of investment and dreams of future success. Charles, Tinuke, Tade, and their friends wore academic regalia like armor, convinced that their degrees, combined with their viral fame and family connections, would open every door in Lagos. They were wrong. The job market that awaited them was brutal, competitive, and surprisingly unimpressed by social media fame. The oil companies their fathers had promised would hire them were downsizing. The banks that had seemed guaranteed were implementing hiring freezes. The government positions that had always been available to connected families were suddenly requiring actual competence and experience. Chelsea's first interview was at Keding Group. He arrived confident, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, carrying a briefcase that had never held anything more challenging than his phone and wallet. The interview panel was headed by Mrs. Ngozi Okeke, a woman who had climbed from marketing assistant to regional director through 15 years of exceptional work. "Tell us about your leadership experience," she said, reviewing his resume. "Well," Charles began, settling into his rehearsed speech, "I am something of a social media influencer. I have built a platform around authentic Nigerian values, calling out pretension and keeping people grounded in reality. My content has reached millions of people." Mrs. Okeke glanced at her colleagues. "And how does this translate to business leadership?" "It shows I understand market dynamics," Charles replied confidently. "I can identify what resonates with people, what messages work, how to build brand recognition. Plus, I bring a fresh perspective that cuts through corporate nonsense." "Corporate nonsense?" Mrs. Okeke raised an eyebrow. "You know, all the feel-good rhetoric about teamwork and employee development. The market rewards results, not sentiment. I am not afraid to make tough decisions that other people might be too soft to make." The interview lasted exactly 12 more minutes. Mrs. Okeke's feedback was swift and direct. "Mr. Adebowale, Keding Group builds success through respect for all stakeholders, employees, customers, and communities. Your approach seems fundamentally incompatible with our values. We won't be moving forward with your application." Charles left confused and angry. How could they not see his value? How could they choose corporate nonsense over his proven ability to capture attention and influence people? The next interview went worse, and the next, and the next. Tinuka faced similar rejections at the banks where her mother's connections had always guaranteed opportunities. Tade's applications to shipping companies were dismissed despite his family's influence in the industry. One by one, the doors they had expected to open remained firmly closed. The problem wasn't just their attitudes, though that was certainly a factor. The problem was that Nigeria's business landscape was evolving. Companies were prioritizing competence over connections, substance over style. The new generation of business leaders had less patience for entitlement and more focus on actual capability. After 6 weeks of rejections, the group met at their usual hangout, a high-end restaurant in Victoria Island that had once felt like their natural habitat. Now, with no job prospects and no income beyond their family's allowances, even this familiar luxury felt precarious. "This is insane," Charles said, anger barely contained. "We are the most qualified graduates in our class. We have proven track records of success. We have connections, experience, vision. How are we not getting hired?" "Maybe it's the economy," Tinuka suggested weakly. "Maybe nobody is hiring right now." But Tade had done his research. That is not true. Companies are hiring. I've seen the job postings. They are just not hiring us. The reality was sinking in. Their viral fame had made them unemployable. Human resources departments had watched their videos, seen their attitudes, and concluded that these were not the kind of people they wanted representing their companies. As weeks turned into months, desperation began to creep in. The initial rejections had stung their pride, but now the situation was affecting their lifestyle, their self-image, their family relationships. Chelsea's father had been patient at first, proud of his son's media success and confident that the right opportunity would emerge. But as rejection letters piled up and his son's attitude grew increasingly bitter, patience wore thin. Charles, I've made calls to every company I know, Chief Adebowale said during a tense family dinner. Your reputation precedes you, and frankly, it is not the reputation I thought we were building. What do you mean? Charles asked, though he was beginning to suspect. That video, son, that's YouTube channel, the way you speak to people, business leaders are talking and they are not impressed. They see you as arrogant, cruel, unmanageable. Some have told me directly that they wouldn't hire you at any price. The words hit harder than any interview rejection. Tinuka was facing similar pressure at home. Her mother, once supportive of her daughter's social media career, now viewed it as an embarrassing obstacle to serious employment. Do you understand what you have done to yourself? Mrs. Arowolo demanded. I can't even mention your name in certain circles anymore. People remember that video, Tinuke. They remember how you treated that man, and they wonder what kind of person I raised. The group tried rebranding themselves, deleting the most controversial videos, toning down their language in new content, but the internet never forgets. And their reputation had crystallized around those early moments of cruelty. They expanded their job search beyond their preferred sectors, applying to companies they had previously considered beneath them. Mid-tier banks, smaller oil companies, family businesses that were growing but not prestigious. Still nothing. It was Tade who discovered Ecovantage Corporation during one of his increasingly desperate online searches. The company's website was impressive. A Fortune 500-sized operation specializing in waste management, recycling and environmental services across West Africa. Their headquarters occupied a gleaming tower in Victoria Island. Their fleet of vehicles was massive and their employee benefits package was generous. Most importantly, they were hiring. Look at this, Tade said, gathering the group around his laptop in the university's computer lab. Ecovantage Corporation, they are huge, like really huge, and they are looking for junior executives, management trainees, business development associates. This could be perfect. Charles studied the website with growing excitement. Environmental services, he read. That is a growth industry. Government contracts, corporate partnerships, international expansion possibilities. This could actually be better than the oil companies. Tinuka was already pulling up their social media pages. Look at their LinkedIn. They've got partnerships with companies across Africa. Their CEO speaks at international conferences. This is legitimate corporate success. The irony was lost on them completely. They saw a successful company in the waste management industry and never connected it to the garbage collector they had humiliated months earlier. In their minds, successful companies were run by people like them, educated, connected, sophisticated. The idea that the man they had mocked could be connected to this level of success was literally unthinkable. They spent hours crafting their applications, emphasizing their education, their family connections, their leadership experience, And yes, even their social media success, reframed now as brand management and public engagement experience. Chelsea's cover letter was particularly confident. As a graduate of the University of Lagos Business Administration program and a proven leader in digital communications, I am excited to contribute to Ecovante Corporation's continued growth and success. My experience in market analysis, brand development, and stakeholder engagement positions me perfectly for your management training program. They submitted their applications on a Friday evening, confident that by Monday they would have interviews lined up. They were right, though not for the reasons they imagined. The email arrived Monday morning, simultaneously to all of them, from Mrs. Folake Adeyemi, Senior Executive Assistant to the CEO. Dear candidates, thank you for your interest in Ecovante Cooperation. After reviewing your application, we would like to invite you for an interview as part of our Executive Management Trainees selection process. Please attend a group interview session on Thursday, October 15th at 2 p.m. at our headquarters, Ecovante Tower, 42nd floor, Victoria Island. This session will include a presentation by our CEO about company culture and expectations, followed by individual interviews. Please arrive promptly and dress professionally. This is an exceptional opportunity to join Nigeria's leading environmental services corporation. Best regards, Mrs. Folake Adeyemi, Executive Assistant to the CEO, Ecovante Corporation. The response was everything they had hoped for: immediate, professional, and from the top level of the organization. Charles called the others immediately. "Did you guys get the mail?" he asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Just now," Tinuke replied, excitement clear in her voice. "The CEO himself is going to present to us. This is huge." Tade was already researching the company's financial information. "I found their revenue reports. These guys are massive, bigger than I thought. If we get in here, we are set." They spent the week preparing obsessively. They researched environmental regulations, studied waste management trends, practiced answers to potential interview questions. Charles even bought a new suit, reasoning that this opportunity was too important for anything less than perfection. What they didn't research was the company's leadership. The CEO's biography on the website was surprisingly brief. Mr. Chinedu Okafor founded Ecovante Corporation in 2008 with a vision of transforming West Africa's approach to waste management and environmental sustainability. Under his leadership, the company has grown from a local startup to the region's largest environmental services provider. There was a photo, but it was a formal corporate headshot, the kind that renders people anonymous in expensive suits. None of them looked closely enough to recognize the face, and even if they had, the idea that their garbage collector could be the CEO of a major corporation was so far outside their worldview that they wouldn't have made the connection. Thursday arrived with Lagos' typical humid heat and chaotic traffic. The group met at Tade's house in Ikoyi to travel together, their excitement barely contained. "This is it," Charles said as they climbed into the taxi. "This is our moment. After today, everything changes." "I can already see myself in that corner office," Tinuke added, checking her makeup one final time. The taxi wound through Lagos Highlands Business District, past banks and oil companies that had already rejected them, toward their future at Ecovante Corporation. Ecovante Tower rose 45 stories into the Lagos sky. its glass facade reflecting the bustling city below. The lobby was sleek, modern, filled with awards and certifications recognizing the company's environmental leadership. A large display showed real-time data from their operations across 12 African countries. The students were impressed despite themselves. Okay, this is seriously impressive, Tade whispered as they approached the reception desk. The receptionist was professional, friendly, and clearly expecting them. Good afternoon. You must be here for the 2 p.m. interview session. Please take the express elevator to the 42nd floor. Mrs. Adeyemi will meet you there. The elevator ride was long and silent. Each of them lost in thought of the opportunities that awaited. Through the glass walls, they could see Lagos sprawling endlessly in all directions, and they felt like they were rising to their rightful place above it all. The 42nd floor was executive level elegant. Marble floors, expensive artwork, floor to ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the lagoon. Mrs. Adeyemi greeted them warmly and led them to a conference room that screamed success. Leather chairs, mahogany table, state-of-the-art audiovisual equipment. Please, have a seat, she said, gesturing to chairs arranged around the table. Mr. Okafor will be with you shortly. He is very much looking forward to meeting you all. As they settled into their seats, Charles felt a surge of confidence. This was exactly where he belonged, in a room that matched his ambitions, about to meet with a CEO who clearly recognized talent when he saw it. The others shared his confidence. After months of rejection and doubt, they were finally in their right place, with the right people, at the right level. They had no idea that their education was about to begin in earnest. The conference room door opened and footsteps approached from behind them. A familiar voice spoke, calm and measured, exactly as they remembered it from that day on the street. Before we begin these interviews, I want to tell you all a story. The silence in the conference room was deafening. Charles felt his heart stop completely, then restart it with a racing rhythm that made his chest tight. Tinuke's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the color draining from her face. Tade's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. 23 graduates sat frozen around the mahogany table, but only 6 of them understood the magnitude of what was happening. The others, students from different programs who had applied for the same positions, looked confused by the sudden tension, the gaps, the way some of their fellow candidates seemed to be having simultaneous panic attacks. Chinedu Okafor stood at the head of the table, no longer in his orange uniform but wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than these students had spent on their entire wardrobes. He was calm, composed, and somehow more imposing in his corporate attire than he had ever been with his waistcoat. But his eyes, those same patient, intelligent eyes, they were exactly as they remembered them from that humiliating day on the street. I can see some of you remember me, he said quietly, his voice carrying easily through the stunned silence. Though I suspect you remember me a bit differently than I appear today. Charles tried to speak, tried to find words, tried to make sense of what was happening. The man they had mocked, the garbage collector they had humiliated for viral content, was sitting at the head of a Fortune 500 boardroom as the CEO of Nigeria's largest environmental services company. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. Charles began, then stopped. What could he possibly say? Chinedu leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. Please, don't let me interrupt your thoughts. I am sure this is quite a surprise. Tinuka found her voice first, though it came out as barely a whisper. You, you are really the CEO, founder and CEO. Chinedu confirmed pleasantly. Started this company 15 years ago with one truck and a vision. We now operate in 12 countries, employ over 3,000 people, and handle approximately 40% of West Africa's commercial waste management. But I suspect you didn't do much research into the company leadership when you applied, did you? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Tade, whose family controlled half the shipping in Lagos Harbour, was staring at the company financial reports displayed on the wall screens. The numbers were staggering. Revenue in the billions, growth rates that outpaced most oil companies, profit margins that made their family businesses look small time, all built by the man they had called worthless. This is impossible, Charles said, finding his voice but not his composure. You were you were collecting garbage on the streets in uniform. I still do, Chinedu replied calmly. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I walk a route. Sometimes, more often when we are training new employees or testing new procedures. You would be amazed what you can learn about a business by doing the frontline work yourself. He gestured toward the windows, toward the view of Lagos sprawling below them. You see, when you are building something from nothing, you learn that every job matters, every role contributes. The man who collects the waste is just as important as the man who signs the contract, because without collection, there are no contracts to sign. The other interview candidates, the ones who hadn't been present for the original humiliation, were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Some looked uncomfortable, sensing the tension. Others were pulling out phones, recognizing a moment that would be talked about for years. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, Chinedu continued. We are all here because you applied for positions at my company. You submitted resumes highlighting your qualifications, your leadership experience, your vision for success. I have read them all, and I have to say, they are quite impressive. He pulled out a folder and opened it to the first application. Mr. Charles Adebowale, University of Lagos Business Administration graduate, social media influencer with proven track record of brand building and market engagement, experience in stakeholder management and public relations, seeking position as management executive. Chelsea's own words, read back to him in this context, sounded hollow and desperate. Ms. Tinuke Arowolo, business administration graduate with emphasis in corporate communications, digital marketing experience with demonstrated ability to create viral content and engage diverse audiences, interested in brand management opportunities. Tinuke closed her eyes, wishing she could disappear. Mr. Tade Bakare, business graduate with family background in logistics and shipping, proven leadership experience and understanding of market dynamics, seeking business development associate position. Each resume reading was like a slow execution. Their own words turned into evidence of their hypocrisy. Chinedu set the resumes down and looked around the room, his gaze settling on each of the 6 students who had humiliated him months earlier. Now, I have to admit, when I received these applications, I was curious. You see, I never forgot that day on Amadu Bello Way. How could I? It was captured so beautifully on video, shared so widely across social media. I believe the hashtag was Trashman Philosopher, wasn't it? The other candidates in the room began to understand. Some had seen the viral video months ago. Others were quickly putting the pieces together. Phones were definitely out now, recording what was clearly going to be another viral moment. But this time, the tables were completely turned. I watched that video many times. Chinedu continued conversationally. I showed it to my executive team, my board of directors, my family. We all had quite interesting discussions about it, about leadership, about character, about the kind of people we want representing our company. Charles finally found the courage to speak, though his voice was shaking. Mr. Okafor, we had no idea. If we had known who you were. But that is exactly the point, isn't it? Chinedu interrupted gently. You didn't know who I was. You saw a man in a uniform doing honest work, and you assumed that made him worthless. You assumed that because I was collecting waste, I had nothing valuable to contribute to the world. He stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city. Let me tell you something about assumptions. In 2008, when I started this company, people assumed I would fail. A young man with no family money, no connections, trying to build a business around garbage. Everyone assumed it was impossible. He turned back to face them. Banks assumed I wasn't worth the risk. Investors assumed I didn't understand business. Potential clients assumed I couldn't deliver quality service. Even my own family assumed I was wasting my education and should get a real job. The room was completely silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of Lagos traffic 42 floors below. But I had learned something that my university education never taught me. I learned it from my father, who worked 3 jobs to pay for my schooling. I learned it from my mother, who cleaned offices at night so I could have textbooks. I learned that no honest work is beneath you if it serves a purpose larger than yourself. Tinuka was crying now, silent tears running down her cheeks, ruining the makeup she had spent an hour perfecting. So when I say I still walk routes every Tuesday and Thursdays, it's not because I have to. It is because I choose to. Because the moment I think I am too good to do the work my employees do every day, I become exactly the kind of person who would mock a stranger on the street for doing honest work. Chinedu returned to his seat and opened a different folder. Now, let's talk about your qualifications. Mr. Adebowale, your resume mentions your proven track record of brand building. I assume you are referring to your YouTube channel, Reality Check Nigeria. Charles nodded miserably. I watched every episode. Very enlightening. You and your friends made a habit of finding hardworking people and humiliating them for your entertainment. A taxi driver who was studying for his GED, a market woman who was teaching herself English, a security guard who was writing a novel in his spare time. He pulled out printed screenshots from their videos. In each case, you took someone who was trying to improve their situation, someone who refused to accept limitations, and you mocked them back into reality. Your reality. A reality where people should know their place and stay in it. The other interview candidates were staring now, openly shocked by what they were learning about their fellow applicants. Ms. Arowolo, you mentioned your corporate communications experience. I particularly remember your comment to me that day. You are nothing. The only thing you would ever be is exactly what you are right now. Invisible, irrelevant, and poor. Tinuke sobbed openly now. I've been thinking about those words for months. You declared me invisible, but here we are in my boardroom. You called me irrelevant, but my company employs more people than your father's political constituency. You assumed I was poor, but this building costs more to construct than most government budgets. He paused, letting the words sink in. But the most interesting part of your statement was the assumption that being poor would somehow make me worthless as a human being, that economic status determines human value. It's a fascinating perspective from someone who inherited every advantage she has ever had. Tade tried to speak up. Sir, we were young, we were stupid, we made terrible mistakes, but we have learned. Have you? Chinedu asked sharply. Have you really? Because your behavior after that video went viral suggests otherwise. You built an entire brand around cruelty. You turned humiliation into entertainment. You monetized meanness. He pulled out more printed materials, screenshots of their subsequent videos, their social media posts, their interviews where they bragged about keeping people grounded in reality. You didn't learn from your mistake. You doubled down on it. You turned one moment of cruelty into a lifestyle, a philosophy, a business model. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker. The other candidates were clearly uncomfortable, some gathering their things as if preparing to leave. But here is what is truly remarkable, Chinedu continued. When you couldn't find jobs anywhere else, when every company you wanted to work for rejected you because of your reputation, you came to me, to the company built by the man you humiliated, seeking employment from the garbage collector you declared worthless. Chinedu stood again and walked around the table, stopping behind each of the 6 students who had mocked him. So, now we come to the question, what should I do with you? Charles looked up hopefully. Maybe this was leading to forgiveness, to a chance for redemption. I could hire you, Chinedu said thoughtfully. Your grades are decent. Your families have connections that could benefit the company, and honestly, we do need junior executives. The positions you applied for are real, and we are actively hiring. Hope flickered in their eyes. But let me tell you what would happen if I hired you. Every day, you would come to work knowing that your boss is a man you tried to destroy for entertainment. Every presentation you gave, every report you submitted, every mistake you made will be evaluated by someone who had seen you at your absolute worst. He continued walking around the table. Your colleagues will know the story. Your subordinates would know the story. Every client meeting, every business dinner, every company function would carry the weight of your past actions. You would be the employees who tried to humiliate the CEO before they knew who he was. The hope was fading from their faces. More importantly, every decision you made will be questioned. Do you support this community program because you believe in it, or because you are trying to make up for your past cruelty? Are you respectful to the cleaning staff because you have learned better, or because you are afraid of how it would look if you weren't? He stopped walking and returned to his seat. The truth is, I don't think you have learned anything yet. I think you are sorry you got caught. Sorry your actions had consequences. Sorry that your cruelty became an obstacle to your ambitions, but I don't think you are sorry for the cruelty itself. He leaned forward. Prove me wrong. The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Charles spoke first, his voice hoarse. How? How can we prove that we have changed? That is not my question to answer, Chinedu replied. That is yours to figure out. But I will say this. Real change isn't something you perform for an audience. It is something you do when no one is watching, when there is no benefit to yourself, when the only reason to do better is because better is who you choose to be. He gathered his papers and stood to leave. The positions you applied for are still available. Applications are still being accepted. If you want to work for this company, you are welcome to reapply in 1 year, but not as the people you were when you walked into this room today. Come back as the people you choose to become. As he reached the door, he turned back one final time. Oh, and one more thing. I am going to continue walking my route every Tuesday and Thursday. If you see me on the streets, collecting waste, doing the work that needs to be done, try to remember that the man in the uniform is the same man who sits in this chair. And maybe ask yourself, what kind of person do you want to be when you meet him? 1 year later, the sun was setting over Lagos as Chinedu finished his route on Victoria Island. It had been a good day. Efficient collections, no equipment problems, positive interactions with the building managers who contracted their services. As he loaded the last bags into his truck, he noticed a familiar figure approaching. Charles Adebowale, but changed, thinner, wearing a simple button-down shirt instead of designer clothes, carrying what looked like a worn briefcase. Mr. Okafor, Charles said quietly, I hope it is okay that I am here. It is okay, Chinedu replied, continuing his walk. How have you been, Charles? Learning, Charles said simply. I got a job at a small NGO. We work with street children, trying to get them into school programs. The pay is, well, it is nothing compared to what I thought I'd be making by now. But the work matters. Chinedu nodded, listening. I wanted to thank you, Charles continued, for not hiring me that day, for not making it easy. I would have just been performing redemption instead of living it. And now? Charles was quiet for a long moment. Now I understand what you meant about honest work, about not thinking you are above any job that serves a purpose. I see these kids on the streets, and I remember how I used to look at people like you, how I thought circumstances determined worth. He paused. I also wanted to tell you that Tinuke and Tade are doing well. Tade is working at a community development organization in Ajegunle. Tinuke is teaching business classes at a vocational school. We don't make YouTube videos anymore. Chinedu finished loading his truck and turned to face Charles fully. That is good to hear. Are you reapplying to Ecovantage? Charles shook his head. No, sir. I think my path is different now, but maybe that is okay. Maybe I needed to learn that success isn't about getting the job you want. It is about becoming the person who deserves it. As Charles walked away, Chinedu smiled. Sometimes the best lessons were the ones that taught people they didn't need what they thought they wanted. The next morning, Mrs. Folake brought him 3 applicants that had arrived by email overnight, all from graduates of the University of Lagos Business Program, all with impeccable grades and impressive family connections. Chinedu looked at the names and addresses, then made a note in his calendar. Tuesday and Thursday routes will be very interesting this week. After all, you never knew who you might meet on the streets of Lagos. Success isn't about being above honest work. It is about understanding that all honest work has dignity and the people who do it deserve respect. True leadership begins when you realize that your worth isn't determined by looking down on others, but by lifting them up alongside you. Thank you for watching Raw Tales Africa. This story reminds us that respect, humility, and hard work are the foundations of true success. Never judge someone by their circumstances. You never know who might be building an empire while wearing work clothes. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Let's build a community that values character over status, effort over entitlement. What lesson will you take from Chinedu's story? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our latest stories of inspiration, redemption, and the power of treating everyone with dignity.